Hello, welcome to our Thursday evening workshop. And if you two, or you three, Lincoln?
Two.
Two. If you two could introduce yourselves and then kick it off for us.
Tracy Roy, Finance Director.
Kevin Gagne, Director of Public Works.
So we're going to start off with the water utility. On page 18 for the new program and services, they have one new program and service, which is the project management software. This is the one that was, you saw it in the general fund for a portion of $17,500. The rest is covered within the utility funds, split between water, sewer, and stormwater. Do you have any questions for Kevin on what the software will entail? And
yeah, I do. Explain it.
Do you mind? Thank you.
Yes, I
Thank
do.
you.
It's interesting. We're being somewhat informal here, but I've heard from two constituents that they cannot hear us when they're watching us on television. So an admonition to all of us, myself included, please use your microphones. So that being said, Mr. Director, could you explain what this software is and how it will save us money?
Yes. So this is the second year that we've asked for a project management software. This would enable Public Works, majority engineering, but also other divisions in Public Works to be able to see the long-term schedules of some of our DOT and federal highway projects, some of our LCIP projects where they get scoped out, preliminary design, and then years later we get funding, and then we need to go to preliminary and then bid package, as well as in-depth detail for engineering projects and where those are. So right now we do not have a project management software. It's being done on Excel. It's being done on regular Microsoft Office platforms. With the turnaround in staff, we are on our second or third assistant city engineer. When a key person leaves, we're trying to make sure we're not losing track of those critical path activities, and we want to execute and get projects that are funded out and completed on the street. So this would enable us to track those really time-critical pieces of probably 30 projects plus, depending on the year. We are looking at other software options, so I may be back to the table with a different version, but this is the one where the Public Works team of upper management and some supervisors that would utilize this. So you have public buildings, you have the Deputy Director of Utilities, you have engineering, and we have highway that would be utilizing this. We actually have solid waste superintendent, or actually it's John Kaczynski. He's our environmental compliance officer, I believe. He's looking at using this project management for the solid waste changes that we're looking at doing, because it's such a large project and there's different critical path things that we don't want to drop the ball on.
Thank you. A couple of follow-ups. Is this a license or a subscription?
This is an annual subscription, and I believe the package that we specified is a web-hosted, help stand up. So it's to out-of-the-box type work. It would take some time to stand it up to get all the users.
Is this a $70,000 a year subscription?
No, it's a $70,000 first year, and I believe subsequent years are around $35,000.
1,000.
Correct.
Okay.
It is expensive, and we're looking at other options. The gaps we've seen have been something, there's probably 10 other ones that we've looked at that other private firms, we're trying to leverage Teams as much as possible. So we are definitely trying to leverage all the software that the city currently has licensing for and seats for. The other versions are more, if you're a technology company, doing a lot of online things and getting requests. It doesn't quite work for an engineering firm, or and we're looking at critical path method. So this is the one that's of preference now from the team, but we're willing to look at options.
Okay. I'm not trying to second guess the team's decision. That's not my purview. But I am looking at a $35,000 ongoing annual cost. Another question is, you indicated that you got some turnover in your department. What's the learning curve on this particular software so that someone who knows the software and is capable of using it to its best advantage leaves for another job and we bring a new person on? There's a cost involved in bringing that person up to speed too, and I hope we're recognizing that.
Absolutely. We've demoed the product. We would like to get another demo with some of our new staff, and we're looking to do that soon. And we're also considering Microsoft Project. So Microsoft Project may be much cheaper. It's something that I've asked MIS to look into to see if we already have licensing or if we would just be purchasing out. The problem with that is that it's not out of the box setup. So 70,000 versus say 5 or 10, what are you getting for that service? I don't know that we need cloud-enabled services. We don't need server-level services. So we're trying to understand, I think the learning curve may be bigger when you have to set up all of your linked projects in Microsoft Project.
You say we don't need cloud services, but we're talking about flexible work week. We're talking about working from home.
Correct.
So has that been factored into a decision that we only want server-based software here?
So right now, the level that we're operating at, we can on our Microsoft Office platform. So if we went with that, we would have those services. We also have SharePoint. The cloud service, most of what we're using, we can actually VPN if we needed to do something like that. So I don't see a cloud service for this software as being operational critical.
I see. Okay, thank you. And back to the point that I continue to harp on whenever we look at new programs and services, particularly those that are aimed at saving costs, is let's make sure we have a mechanism in place that will track the financial advantage we have by a $70,000 capital outlay. Are we going to recoup that over, what's the financial payback period of these things?
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much, Director.
Absolutely.
Councilor Najin.
So forgive my ignorance, but, and I imagine there's probably some level of security that's required for some of these programs too, but like, right now, you said you didn't need cloud-based services. You're probably using OneDrive to store things.
Correct.
So you have
We have our
access.
in-system network, and then we also have the secure
Gotcha.
OneDrive. Yep.
So programs like Trello or Slack, they wouldn't be appropriate for this type of
We evaluated those.
okay.
Yep.
And I guess the last question I have is we have story maps already like as something that we build out.
Correct.
And is that like a platform that would benefit this? I'm sure you've looked at everything, right?
So we have the full version of Esri Suite.
Mm-hmm.
So we've looked at using some of the Esri as dashboards to be able to export out of our Beehive asset management system and be able to have operational dashboards for our supervisors, for our managers, and ultimately we'd be able to share with anybody else that's interested in those type of projects. But it would be nice to have the director, myself, be able to see what our quarterly goals are and then drill down into those. And unfortunately, it's a lot of setup.
Thanks.
Yep.
So as we're evaluating software here, so what's the name of this project management software?
This one is Project Mates.
Okay. And we had MIS look at, you said Microsoft Project?
I've asked on a price point from the MIS team, from Craig Starr, to understand what do we have, is it included in our license? Or because we already have Microsoft Office Suite as our network and then as our software package, is there a discount? Would it be cheaper than what I'm seeing as an online per seat
Right.
right off the website?
Sorry, what was the name of the software? Project Mates? Or
Project Mates.
Project Mates. And so is this is a vertical application meant for engineering projects, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so I guess my concern, if we're evaluating other software, and I realize there's tons of project software out there, different versions, different companies, and the engineers aren't working for free either, and so 35,000 certainly sounds like a lot, but it's in the grand scheme of things. How many engineers do we have?
Professional engineers, I believe we have the city engineer, assistant city engineer, 2 staff engineers, but the John Kaczynski, who I'm forgive me for his title, but he's our MS4 as well as solid waste. He's a PE, I am as well. So I think we have like 6 professional engineers in the department. Louis Turcott, who's the head of buildings, facilities, he would be utilizing the software as well. So we're not strictly looking at utilizing as engineers, but also our pavement. This is a platform that we're looking to do internal projects as well.
Right, and it's likely that Project Mates, being this vertical application, has things very specific for engineering projects in a way that, Microsoft Project might not. And yes, Microsoft Project might be free or cheaper, but we will quickly lose this $35,000 in like wasted staff time and everything else. So I think it's great that we asked MIS to look at it, but they're not engineers. I think we should have our engineers evaluate the software and look at the features that they need, and then not just the features that the software offers, but what is the workflow happening.
Correct.
How are we managing projects here for the city of Lewiston, and how does that map to the software, and what software is going to make things easier for the engineers? I think that's what's missing here.
And that's part of that initial $70,000 first year is what they call standing up a software. Mm-hmm. It's actually understanding that workflow, customizing it to your needs, and then doing the training and then implementing it.
Yeah, and what can happen is you have software that sort of works but doesn't quite, and so you get a lot of wasted time, and you add up all the minutes and everything else in a year, and we're really losing money at that point. So I just want to make sure we're not looking solely at cost.
We are considering that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Councilor Roy?
I was just gonna say, do we usually have excess money from water, sewer, and stormwater every year? Is that something that could pay for that $35,000 going forward if we do go with this, or?
So there's 2 sides, and Director Roy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the revenue side of the utility enterprise funds, and then there's the expense side. So they're depending on what's going on. So if you look at the budgets, as Director Roy will go over it, generally the last couple of years we've been in the black and have cash reserve, but not necessarily. So we have some large capital debt coming. The CSO project at the sewer treatment plant was going to up our fees to pay for that. Our capital plan on water right now, we're getting the transmission main, which was federal money. But investing in our water distribution mains is a big expense on the water side. Storm side, we've been doing pretty good, but we're seeing a lot of large culverts that need to be replaced, and right now they're being held up in permitting. So as soon as those go, we'll be doing more larger projects, and those have ramped up in expenses. So it's not something that we can forecast and count on, but how we've tried to fund this software is look at it as not being totally on the tax side, but fund it 25% each way, 75% across the 3 utilities, and then on the tax side in engineering to be able to fund that. So it seems equitable of all the users as well as all the customers that are taking benefit from the software.
Thank you.
Councilor Glant?
Thank you, Mayor. Getting back to the cost side, could we do something similar as we do with vehicles where you control the whole thing and they pay you? Is that a possibility to better manage the process, for funding purposes, and they know they have a line item that they got to pay every year? And you're not worried, it's going to have to be figured into the regular budget. That's probably something Tracy might, we charge our vehicles out from one department. Could that not be charged out of software, charged out over those departments, and then have one department be the lead?
It'll be separated between the 4. So you have a portion in your general fund, which will come out of our MIS, as all our other software maintenance contracts come out of, and then a portion in each: water, sewer, stormwater. So those are the 4 departments, because the piece that's going to be used out of MIS will be for the general fund portion that Kevin mentioned that they want to use in Public Works for maybe the paving the roads, keeping track of all of that stuff. that work. So that will be paid out of MIS, just like any contract maintenance.
That's similar how we're doing Beehive utility, our asset management right now. The 3 utilities are picking up a quarter of the cost, and the rest is going to the general fund, like Tracy mentioned.
All right, thank you.
You know, an analogy here is, you know, Public Works employees, like the paving crew, they need the right tools for the job, correct? And that's exactly what we're talking about here. The engineers need the right tool for the job.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna start with water, is on page 81. So revenues increased 188,625, or 3%, with expenses increasing 376,313, or 6%. This will produce an operating deficit of 169,137. So as you can see on page 81, what Director Gagne was mentioning, you can see at the bottom of the page is the ending recommended 2025 amount. That is what's estimated to be in the fund balance at the end of the year of 2025, if 2024's estimates come in correctly. So personal services increased 154,464, or 12%. This is attributed to the regular time increase in, regular wages increasing 89,940 due to steps and COLAs. Overtime at 30,605. This is for weekend work for main water breaks, water treatments, and testing. Temporary wages of $33,920, all in operations due to the minimum wage. Fringe benefits decreased 1,064. The 2 drivers were the health insurance went down 18,893 due to the rates, and main PERS, which is our retirement, increased 9,035 due to the steps and COLAs. Debt service increased $141,094, or 5%. The interest for debt increased $57,802, and the principal increased $84,430. This is due to the bonds that we sold in September, and the estimate for the bonds that we will be selling for the 2023 during the fiscal year 25. Operating expenses decreased $346,181, or 17%. The largest decrease was in the purchase-powered utilities. This was mentioned when we did Public Works streetlights. All the streetlights and water power is charged to water and the pump stations, and the credit for the Monty is applied to the water and street light credit to the water. So all the credit goes to the water department. That's why you're seeing a decrease in the operating expenses. Water treatment decreased 8,341. The lines had some increases, but there was a large decrease for chemicals of 59,599. This is due to less quantity needed. The rates went up for the chemicals, but the quantity actually went down. Distribution expense, which is on page 82 and 83, increased 31,350. This is due to material and supplies increase in 50,500. This is due to the police detail for the water main breaks and the distribution system maintenance and repairs. This is offset by a decrease in paving under this line of 27,200 due to less paving. Customer accounts on page 83 increased 5,923. There were small increases in each line, no large driver in this. Administration and general expenses decreased 15,203. The decrease is all in contractual expenses of 26,782, with the largest decrease being in the legal expense of 28,000 decreased. Capital Just a reminder is on page 80. That increased 428,000 for the depreciation expense. And that is water. Do you have any questions?
Councilor Ehrman.
Thank you. So these capital projects on page 80, the ones at the top are to be paid out of the reserve that's within that department, or?
No.
No?
No, these are in the LCIP.
So all of them
So
are?
you will be visiting that when we go over the LCIP for all the other departments.
Okay.
And these are funded out of,
One second. Administrator Hunter, did you have a comment?
Some,
Counselor Harriman, you are correct. The ones at the top, the water, sewer, stormwater, those are included in the operating budget. When Tracy mentioned the depreciation expense, those are the projects that depreciation expense covers. Halfway through the page, you will see an LCIP bond issue request. Those are the ones that are scheduled to be bonded. I believe that was your question.
Yes, thank you.
sorry for the confusion.
That's okay, thanks.
Councilor Roy, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, it said here, forgive my ignorance, paving went down. I mean, our streets need paving, so
yeah, so this isn't street paving, this is trench restoration paving. I went over to water and sewer in around 2000, and for a long time, when the frost came in, especially a very cold winter, we would blow up Lisbon Street, we would blow up Sabata Street, we would blow up major arterials, East Avenue. In the last
Talking about water main breaks.
water main breaks.
Thank you.
Yep, the main break would happen. We're talking about large diameter pipes. It would heave up the pavement, create a big hole. I think last winter we had an issue on East Avenue. We had an issue on Pond Road where we had large sections of the road washed out from a water main break. So this repair account is for pipe materials, granular materials, and then we have the labor, a separate paving account so we keep track of that because in the history it's been very large. This year, with such a warm year, there's been less breaks. So we had one on Lisbon Street, so we've got that patch to do. So what's going to happen is after the paving plant's open, we'll come in, cut it out, contractor will pave it to a good depth and restore it. So that's what the paving account is for. We also utilize it during DOT projects, even if it's locally administered and we put the bid out, DOT does not pay for utilities. So if we're going in and lowering manholes or changing things, it's charged to the utilities that are doing that work prior to the paving job.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, the water rates are established by the Public Utilities Commission. Who on city staff prepares applications for those rate reviews?
So that is the staff in the finance department and auditing under Director Roy.
Are we anticipating looking for a rate review before PUC in the next 2 to 3 years?
Currently, this year, we're recommending no increase.
I see that, but I also see that we are spending down the fund balance in that reserve, and I wondered if you had a sense of how long it might be before we have to go to PUC and ask for an increase.
So right now, we have a Ty & Bond, our consultant, is doing a rate case study to give us a actual model, and it's for the 3 utilities. So it's looking at our operational cost, it's looking at our bonded and anything that we have coming up, trying to program that in multi-year. So we have the CIP, but as far as the budget impact goes, and Administrator Hunter might be able to answer that better. I've been the operation guy, but we're trying to get that forecasting. So as the engineers and the planners working with finance and the administration, we can look ahead to some of these large requests that are 2 or 3 years out and see what that impact would be on our rates on both water, sewer, and stormwater. So the results of that are coming in the next several months.
Okay, thank you. And that certainly would inform our decision to go to PUC. The stormwater and the sewer rates are entirely internal. We do that.
Local.
Actually, these folks up here make that determination.
Correct.
But we don't have that authority for the water.
Correct.
Okay.
So our finance department will be looking at that, and they treat it as an enterprise fund and treat it in a similar fashion, but the requirements of a water rate increase are directly driven by meetings and specific language and notice, that's by PUC, correct?
Okay. Thank you, Director.
Counselor Najin?
It's okay.
I just, again, forgive my ignorance, but the water main breaks, which some years are great, some years are not as much. I'm trying to get an idea of what we do to prevent them. So do we have a program in place where we're doing some work to either replace older water mains, or I know we've treated them, but maybe you could just talk to that.
So we do. So we have water line, we have about 150 miles of water distribution in the city of Lewiston. 24 inches, the largest, down to 2 inch. Our oldest pipe is from the 1878. It's on Lincoln Street. So where if you look at history of pipe, the early stuff was wood, then they went to metal. When they got to cast iron, the very thick cast iron is very solid, but they weren't using cement lining until 1975. So we actually went in and rehabbed that pipe. The joints were good, the wall thickness was good, and we were able to scrape that out and put a cement lining in. And the cement lining prevents interior corrosion. So if the pipe is large enough and structurally sound, we do that. The problem is after each of the different world wars, they started, refining. They needed the metals they needed, so they tried to engineer the pipe and made it thinner. Portland Water District actually did a study, and the design was going to be a 100-year pipe life, and the age got down after each world war in which the resources were needed, and then they looked at it, and the failure of all these pipes kind of lined up within a 10-year period. So they were doing a very aggressive, proactive. They actually went to PUC and got some advanced funding to be able to replace those before failure. So they were very proactive in that. What we've been doing is, instead of doing that study, we just said, we're going to start getting aggressive. So the last 20 years, we've changed out the large diameter transmission mains or distribution mains that were unlined cast or brittle lined cast. So in 1965, they started cement lining these cast iron pipes. In 1975, they actually came out with ductile iron, and we started using ductile iron and have been using ductile iron since then. So right now, we have about 13 miles left of the smaller diameter, unlined cast iron pipe. I actually have an example if you guys like to see it. Little prop.
Let's do it.
I swear we didn't choreograph this.
So this is a piece of cast iron water line that has not been treated inside, and this is the natural corrosion that occurs. We call it tuberculation. It's iron. We try to flush, but this is just internal.
How old is that pipe?
It didn't come through that, just, be okay with that.
Public see that.
Zoom in on this. There you go.
Turn around. There you go.
That's the money.
What year is that pipe?
This is pre-65, pre-1965.
Pre-1965.
This came out of an actual piece of pipe in somewhere in Lewiston. I don't have the actual address.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
So we are being proactive. If you look at the capital improvement program, we're trying to be ahead of DOT projects, ahead of paving projects, ahead of complete neighborhood redesigns, and we're trying to get ahead of that. And that's some of what we talked about, of trying to keep either the asset management or the project management and making sure we're doing the underground utility work a year or two before a paving project. Because the last thing we want to do is have a water main break and blow up with water pressure a brand new paved street.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Counselor Chittum?
Question either for Administrator Hunter or, I mentioned at our last council meeting that we had a presentation on phosphorus treatment in Lake Auburn. The costs for that ranged in the several $1,000,000 for the various options. Were a project like that to take place, how would the city of Lewiston be involved? Would we be working directly with the Auburn Water District or with the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, or what's the mechanism there?
It can take on several different options. The watershed typically does not issue long-term debt, so it would still fall back on the city to authorize and the Auburn Water District to authorize the debt. Whether it's all funneled through the Watershed Commission or whether it's funneled through the two operating crews, you know, it could happen either way from that standpoint.
Thank you, but either way, the Lewiston City Council would somehow be involved before somebody decides to
Absolutely.
spend $15 million to treat the...
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we're all set on water?
It appears so.
I did forget to mention that water has 17.5 employees in that department. We're gonna go to sewer on page 87. Again, there's no recommended rate increase. Increase in revenues of 16,500 or 0.24%. There's an increase in expenses of 368,444 or 5%, producing an operating deficit of 1,253,665, with enough carry-forward cash to absorb without having to have a rate increase. Personnel services increased 64,597, or 9.19. This department has 10.5 employees in it. Salaries rose 65,697 due to steps and COLAs. Fringe increased $1,772. Debt increased $155,807, or 7%. This is due to the sale of the 22 bonds that we did in September, and an estimated for the new debt of 2023 that will be going out to bond in fiscal year 24-4. Treatment plant decreased $17,772. Operating expenses increased $219,040, or 31%. The outlining driver in that is under the transmission operation. The department increased $208,380 due to the contractual services of $177,100. This is due to add in the water meters, radio read-in devices that were removed in the fiscal year 24 budget due to the supply issue. They were back ordered and were not able to get them, so in fiscal year 24, they removed them from the budget. Customer counts increased 3,926. Administration and general expenses increased 5,634. And capital outlay, again, is on page 80. This decrease due to depreciation of 55,000, or 13.2%. Any questions on sewer?
Counselor Harriman?
Thank you. I had a question on that, the contractual services for transmission operations. It sounded like you said radio reading devices for the water meters.
Correct, so it was the water meters also, sorry.
I was just wondering why that would be under contractual services and not like a capital expense.
So they purchase, page 88. So it's contractual services, but I believe it is under hazmat.
Counselor Harriman, if I can help you out and help the team out a little bit here. Typically, the beaters are purchased by the water department, so they're the water department's assets. But because the flow is also beneficial to the sewer department, the sewer department reimburses the water fund for those purchases.
I see.
So that's why it's a contractual on this side.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And if you look on page 90, it's under depreciation expenses, I believe. So in 24 actual, it was 95,430. And then it jumped up because of other, and I believe that's where it is, isn't it?
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Counselor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see that we've got meter revenue of balance or projection for this year of 6.8 million. Does that include the payments from Auburn? I'm a little uncertain as to how that works because I'm told that the wastewater from Auburn is billed based on mass meters and water quality. So we measure total suspended solids, BOD, and I don't know what other parameters, as
Right.
well as flow. So do we bill the city of Auburn?
No. So the Lewiston Auburn Water Pollution Control Authority is its own quasi-entity, and we have representatives from Auburn and from Lewiston on that board. I'm one of the board members, and they actually do the metering, and then based on that percent flow, attribute each community what they should be assessed. So if you look at what so we don't actually bill, but we get billed. So you look under 6230, that's the treatment account, and that's the big driver, other than capital debt on the sewer budget, is how much are we paying for sewer treatment at the treatment facility. The other treatment facility is no-name pond septic. Those are the only two items in that division of sewer, 6230.
So we would expect then that Auburn City Council would be looking at something on the order of 3.2 million or comparable.
So it's the Auburn Water and Sewer Districts.
Right.
So the Auburn Sewer District takes care of, it handles that bill and receives that and then distributes it to their customers through their water metering and sewer use charges.
Okay, and then reimburses the Lewiston Auburn Water Pollution Control Facility.
Correct.
In the same manner that we reimburse them for the 3.2 million.
Correct. And it's actually a monthly bill. And so they actually look at, like they forecast next month what we believe it'll be and based on historical trends. And then they reconcile at the end of the month to make sure that, and try to, right now I think we're carrying 66 to 67% of the flows going to the treatment plant. We typically don't have any BOD charges to customers. We've chosen not to do that. Auburn's getting away from it, so it's strictly a flow-paced. If it's below that, then it's adjusted monthly. So if it's actually 64, they bill us 64%. If it goes up to 68, they bill us 68% of the flow that they're receiving at the plant.
So am I to understand or infer from that that the Lewiston Auburn Water Pollution Control Facility does not really have quality issues, that BOD, suspended solids, and the other parameters are not a function, or rates are not a function of those parameters?
No, they do charge us those rates if we have users that contribute to BOD strength. But we have not, and historically, we have not chosen to charge that BOD charge to our businesses that provide the loading. Auburn Water and Sewer District, they did, and they're looking, I believe, to get away from that.
Okay, I guess it would matter a great deal as to how large an impact those high-strength wastes would have on the plant.
The biggest contributor that I saw was when Auburn Fiber existed in the city of Auburn, they had very high BOD loading, TSS loading, and flows. When they closed, it changed our percentages. We were like 55 Lewiston, and we shot right up to over 62% based on the flow from that industry. So
I can't think offhand of industries in Lewiston that would have a significant impact on either solids or flow.
Typically, it's been any of the beverage or brewery establishments typically have a higher strength. Some of our bakeries do have higher strength. So it depends on the industry, and it depends on what they're doing for recycled water or how they're handling their wash water. But
Thank you.
To say, so we don't have violations from, but they do monitor their loading and adjust accordingly.
Councilor Najin.
This is probably more for Director Roy, but for the 2024 budget, it looks like we were expecting to do a drawdown of about $900,000 from our cash reserves. And it looks like we're going to actually only draw down, it looks like the difference, basically the budget is about 200K under what we predicted, is that correct? I just
So
kind
the
of want to
begin-
understand how that,
So the beginning cash as of the 2023 was 2,000,005, sorry. So they're expecting to come in at 659,000 that they would need to use from that 2,000,005. So that would leave 1,000,008 to start the year off. So if budget's passed as is, as recommended, it will come in under 1,000,025, so we'll use that 1,000,008 and only leave 591,000 left in that fund at the end of 2025.
I completely get that. My question is more around where we realize a savings of $240,000, or at least an estimated savings of $240,000 in the spend down.
Are you talking about actual year 2023?
I'm talking
No.
24 projected versus 24 budget.
So Counselor, I think the lion's share you'll see there is under the investment earnings. We budgeted 25,000, we got 95,000 in. So that's a big chunk of that. We reaped some savings on payroll as well as the treatment plant. You picked up some savings there based upon the apportionment that Kevin was charging. You know, we budget for a fixed apportionment, recognizing it's going to vary from month to month, so we are able to pick up a savings from that as well. But those are the lion's share of those pieces.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything further?
No. Next, we'll go over stormwater on page 92. Again, there's no recommended increase. Revenues increased 45,000, or 1.47. An increase in expenses totaling 137,597, or 3.68%. This will produce an operating deficit of 759,888, which will be covered by cash on hand. Personnel services increased 59,000. Note, there are no full-time positions charged here. They are cross-charged when individuals from water and sewer work on stormwater. Salary and wages, regular increased $57,344. Fringe decreased $4,416. Debt service increased $75,650, or 4%. This is due, as I mentioned, in water and sewer to the sale of the 2022 bonds that we sold in September, and the estimated for the new debt of 2023 that we will be selling this year. Operating expenses increased $7,359. Planning and permanent, that's on page 93, decreased $1,501. Storage and retention decreased $500. Collection systems and operations increased $3,560. Customer accounts increased $6,596. And capital remains flat in this department. And again, those are all listed on page 80. Are there any questions on stormwater?
Counselor Najin.
Just overall, so in sewer, how many employees do we have?
In
You said
sewer,
there's 10.5, I think is what you said.
10.5, and
Correct.
there's 17.5 in water.
correct.
In storm, you said that there are no employees, but obviously we have employee salaries and wages, so.
When it's needed, they cross-train, so when work is done for stormwater, they cross-train, they cross-charge those wages to stormwater.
Okay, perfect.
So if you look at page 96, it'll give a summary on what is estimated in the budget for positions that charge to stormwater.
Thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Shinham, do you have something?
Thank you. Not so much a question as a point. I think by now, most folks realize that the rain tax, which funds this department, is a good thing. When it was first implemented, there was a huge hue and cry about additional taxes coming in and the taxpayers being asked to support everything. I'd just like to make certain that people out there realize that the rain tax is one of the more broad-based taxes. This was designed essentially to pick up revenues from people who, organizations that don't normally pay general fund taxes. Without this rain tax, so-called, the general fund would be looking at an additional $3.8 million in expenditures, and I'm looking for a confirmation, looking at the summary of the pro forma cash flow for stormwater utilities. So that's a burden that the taxpayer is sharing with the tax-exempt organizations throughout the city. Your tax bill would be higher without this rain tax than it is now.
I agree with your point, except with calling it a rain tax. The air quotes around it, I understand. This is based on user fees, and that was a major point that I think some people had a hard time getting over. But the ability to shift the burden of stormwater management, compliance, work off the taxpayer and onto the users, which make up tax properties as well as non-tax exempt properties, you're absolutely right.
You're more diplomatic than I, Director. Thank you. Point taken.
Anything further?
No?
Thank you both.
I would add one thing. I was remiss when we talked about Public Works at the last budget session to offer any of you a tour of any of the work, job sites, any of our facilities. Public Works is larger, I think, in Lewiston than most cities in the state. We have it from the source water for our drinking water at the lake, through the wastewater, stormwater, paving, solid waste, municipal garage, facilities, and if I'm leaving a division out, I apologize, but the breadth of which we have, so if you have questions about anything, would like to see anything specific or a general tour, please let us know, and we will answer your questions and show you what you'd like to see.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. I'm still waiting for my boat ride, so.
We will work on that,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor.
Thank you.
When weather's warmer and the river is not raging, how's that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you both. We appreciate everything. Or Councilor Najin.
Just in that last phrasing there, because we are a provider of services for other communities as well. So I'm wondering, does the services that we provide, that LAPCO provides to Sabatis, reduce our costs at all or not?
So they do septic receiving, but as far as collections, we do not collect sewage from Sabatis.
Okay.
So there was, we did some work a couple years ago looking at that possibility of expanding our system into Sabatis and be able to serve them for sewer collections and then ultimately treatment. That ended up not being feasible, and so we did some analysis. But so currently we do not service anybody outside the city of Lewiston. Auburn Water does to drinking water to Poland and other places, but we serve our community only. So the outside hauling is what the sewer treatment plant will do from other septic haulers. That's, I think, about the only thing that they do from outside communities.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Provide lunch with that tour?
Next, we're going to be going over tax increment financing. Again, we'll begin on page 18 with the new programs. So the TIF fund has two new program requests, one for a Main Street program manager at $161,971, and an administrative assistant of $76,525. They are requesting a split of that position, half to come from CDBG administration and half to come from the TIF financing. Do you have any questions on those two programs?
Counselor Najin.
Would you mind?
Sorry, one second. I'd just like the public to know that we've been, Director Lincoln Jeffers has joined Director Roy here, so thank you. Counselor Najin.
Would you mind explaining a little bit of the Main Street program, and how that exactly works? And also, maybe let us know if that opens us up to any additional funding from the state by having such a position.
It's a good question. The Main Street program is a 40-year-old program. It's been national. It came to Maine, I believe, in 1999. There are 10 communities in the state that have adopted it. In the early years, I probably went to 5 Main Street programs, and it's a very dynamic program that's really geared towards revitalizing downtowns. Some of the towns that have it are Bath, Belfast, both Saco and Biddeford, Augusta, Brunswick, Gardner, Rockland. Skowhegan is one of the newer, as is Westbrook. So if you're familiar with those downtowns, they're doing pretty well. Bath was one of the very early ones in the state of Maine. And early in my tenure with the city, it was thought that we should do it. One of the key components of a Main Street program, though, is a heavy volunteer participation. My early years, there was Mayor Kylie Tara had appointed a task force for coming up with the downtown revitalization plan. Plan was very well received, but there was not a single downtown retail or service provider. We had one attorney who was on the firm. We had engineers from both hospitals. We had a very good, engaged task force who became a standing committee of the city, but nobody's had their own skin in the game as far as their livelihood having to make it. And the downtown was struggling. We didn't have enough critical mass at the time to have that Main Street volunteerism. The city did fund a downtown manager who was with the city for about 6 months, and then went on to greener pastures elsewhere. I think we were just a stopping point. He was very well skilled, but ended up becoming the KV Cog executive director. So very talented man, but he didn't stick. And the idea has sort of lingered for a time, and I think the time has come upon us. We now have the Downtown Lewiston Association, who's very engaged, wants to do more. They're looking for more participation from the city. We've had sort of a variety of, the critical mass downtown has ebbed and flowed, and I think the Main Street manager would help make that sure it stops ebbing and increasing was the goal, and that's why we thought we would ask for that funding. Trying to decide exactly where they would be officed. In my mind, I'd love to see them downtown. That's part of what was driving that price, is rather than having them on the 3rd floor at City Hall, have them down there with the people and be easily accessible. A lot of it's programming, a lot of it's downtown revitalization, taking advantage of historic buildings. A lot of it is programming and having various festivals and whatnot. We've got some festivals, but it's just continuing to build on that. It's marketing. It's really looking at your mix of businesses and what's missing from the mix, and then really identifying and going out. So that's sort of a pretty big, broad brushstroke. Does that address your?
Yeah, I think so, for the most part. One of the things that I think that we're seeing is that, per square foot, our downtown is actually the most valuable property within the city. And I think at certain points, we struggle to commit to investment in those spaces because the city demands are large and they go all over the place. So having a programming manager that is specifically focused on basically increasing the returns that we get from the tax base within the downtown development, I think makes sense, so.
Councilor
Gee,
Gallant, Councilor Gallant, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question would be, is the purpose of this individual to fill storefronts? Is it to have a theme? I mean, Brunswick has a theme. If you look how they put things, they pretty much made sure that when you walk down the street in one block, you get pretty much all you want. And the next block is a little bit different. Currently, the way we're set up with all the mom and pops and different stores, that might be difficult unless they're willing to move or relocate in that process. So my understanding or concern would be, we have empty storefronts, but what are we trying, is that the purpose, to fill a storefront? Or is it to bring a theme to the city of Lewiston?
Yeah, I think that would come out of the Main Street program. I think the primary business is let's get more people down there. Let's give people a reason to come. I don't think we would want to be relocating businesses that are up and running and operating well in whatever business they're in. I think it's really taking advantage of that, building the synergy is the idea behind it. One thing I did not mention, you asked about whether this would open us up to other state funding. I think to a degree, but they're not going to fund the position. There's small grant programs. There's a lot of technical expertise that's available. One thing I think we could look at going forward is capitalizing this through the tax increment financing. That we've got a bunch of them that'll be coming to your council here over the next year. The significant one being the New England Clean Energy Connect project. And this is the sort of use that would be eligible and could fund this as well, so it would not be on the general fund.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess you mentioned you wanted them to be in downtown, but it would seem to me if I was a new business coming to town, I'm gonna come here. I'm not gonna be looking for a shop or a building so I would have a concern with having somebody sitting down there, coming here, and we say, oh, go down the street past the library on the right-hand side, that's where our office is. I don't, in my mind, I'm having a hard time to, people aren't walking up down the street looking to find somebody to help them find a rental spot. They may go to the chamber. I mean, if the person was located at the chamber, they had an office there where there's an influx of people who are trying to do certain things. So I'm just, how would that actually look?
It's a good question, and I think all of the above. I mean, it's really, we would certainly walk them down or introduce them or have our Main Street manager come to City Hall. We have a good partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. That is a stopping spot for a lot of people when they're first investigating a community and what can we do. They have shrunk a little bit on their economic development capacity. John Belial, who'd been there for quite some time, has retired for his second time, and I think it's for real this time. But he was a wonderful addition down there, and he was really a large part of it. But certainly Shannon Cox and the rest of the team there is very good at stirring the pot and generating interest and marketing in the community. So I think it would be a partnership on that front. Early on, they may be domiciled at the chamber. I know I've heard from some of the downtown businesses, we don't see enough of City Hall's presence downtown. I admit I tend to be sequestered away up in my third floor office, and having both the community development and economic development side of the house, I don't get on the street as often as I would like or should. But I think it's having that presence where people feel it. I can say that I've been to each of the Main Street communities. I've not investigated all of them thoroughly, how they operate. I've just appreciated the energy and vitality that each of them seems to possess. And I believe in each of those, the offices are on the street as opposed to in City and Hall.
Okay, and I semi-understand that, but what would the dollar value be if the person worked here? In other words, I think the value is in the employee and the person.
Agreed.
Okay, and maybe the first year he needs to be, or she needs to be here, and if that reduces that somewhat, then it might be more easy or more palatable for me to say, yeah, you ought to have that position, because I'm thinking like, you gotta rent a place, you gotta pay utilities, you gotta do all these other items, whereas, if I have somebody upstairs in an office to start, and we find out it blossoms, then maybe the following year budget, I might be, that's a great idea to go. I don't know that, you ask, for me, asking for an awful lot for something we don't know about, and we have space. That's just my thoughts.
Understood. Our space is increasingly limited, though. Every time we hire somebody new, we're like, where are we going to put them? We've got a couple of, the third floor is full of, not full of, but we have quite a few cubicles, thank you. What are they called? Yes, cubicles up there. And so we had to start somewhere, and I don't disagree with the comments. It's just see if we can start it. Maybe it's not fully funded, and we evolve to that. Yeah.
Just
Counselor Najin.
well, you gave me the nods.
I was acknowledging that I see your hand and will be recognizing you next.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. Couple of pieces with that, and just to come back to Tim's point too. A lot of times these offices act as basically like tourist offices for the downtowns. I think that possibly we're in a position right now where maybe that's not absolutely needed, but I do think that, to your point, having a coordinator who is literally downtown all of the time. So basically, like when I ran my business on Main Street, I'd work 10-hour shifts alone, and I certainly wasn't going to City Hall. And in some cases, I would want to avoid City Hall. So there are certain points in which, maybe I had a sign up that I hadn't pulled a permit for yet. So, having somebody who's actually ingrained and enmeshed in the downtown area, who's a city employee, also allows for feedback on what they're seeing within downtown, and supports that possibly we could provide. One thing I'm interested in, and there's actually a really good website about the Main Street Maine program that's available to break it down, read through all of the different benefits that the programming offers. One thing I'm interested in about, would this person be writing any grants at all? And how do you picture in many places, there's coordination between the arts communities, between nonprofits and businesses, as well as some of the housing program pieces, especially we don't really necessarily have a lot of them, but bed and breakfast, things like that. And so I'm just wondering how you see all that functioning, or is this just kind of let's get the position and then figure it out?
Well, yeah, I had not fully written a job description. I've been aware of it. I do think grant writing would be a part of it. Miriam Back-Taylor, who you met the other night, is a very skilled grant writer as well. And even if it's just identifying it, she has that feed coming to her, and she's already passing opportunities on to some of our local nonprofits, saying, here's something you might look at and whatnot. So whether it's Marion herself writing it, or her identifying it and directing it to them, it really depends on the grant source. Federal grants tend to be just overly cumbersome and mind-numbing to apply for. In that case, I would tend to think Marion's probably the best person because she's got it. But some of those, foundation grants or something coming from the Maine Development Foundation or the state, that's the sort of thing. So, good question. I don't have a complete answer, but it's a recognized something we should be able to do.
Councilor Bergeron, Councilor Longchamp.
I think it's a great idea, having a business downtown, and you're right, we don't really see many of you guys down there engaging with us and so forth, so I think it's time. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
I don't know if this has been mentioned yet, but is this modeled after the MDF program?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maine Development Foundation.
Yeah,
who
yeah.
runs
So there's
it in
a
the
whole
state.
framework and everything. I guess if you could find the link and then forward it to all of us, I think
can
that
do
would
that.
better inform us. Councilor Najin.
And just on the administrative assistant, just if you could just give us a little bit of background on so I noticed that it was /CDBG, so economic development. It sounds like they're splitting their tasks between two different
Yes,
departments.
there's currently on the third floor, there are two administrative assistants. One is entirely funded under the code side. The second person, 3/4 of their salary is funded under the code side. 25% of their time is funded under the CDBG grant, and we're very limited, actually, as we've been working on that budget. You heard about the 20% administrative cap. So I'm not sure how much more room we have, but I can say there's an absolute need for more administrative support than what we've had. You know, I've always typed all my own stuff. I filed all my own stuff. And those of you who've been in my office know my filing could use some assistance. Not that that's all they do, but just answering phones, working with people coming in for loans, underwriting, that type. We could just use more administrative support. You know, it's a department of 3 on the economic development side, a like number on the community development side, and we have 25% of an admin position. It's pretty lean.
For specifically community development block grant, nothing for economic development.
Well, I think half of it would be economic development, half of it would be.
No, I'm talking about your current,
Oh, currently, yes.
so you have no administrative assistant for economic.
For economic development, no. She's very kind and does things when I ask her, but half my time is spent on the CD, but that was the reason for the ask.
Yeah, I fully support both these positions. We probably should have had them a long time ago.
So on page 40 is the TIF budget. Overall decrease of $65,705. The economic development budget is funded through the TIF account. In fiscal year 2019, the city council made a decision not to charge lump sum fringe benefits here in order to not drain the reserve account. From this point, the budget has continued to omit those lump sum benefits. Revenues are contingent upon final tax rate. Currently, right now in this budget, we use the $30 tax rate to do the estimated revenues and the estimated credit enhancement refunds. Revenues, the large decrease in the estimated revenues is due to the Walmart TIF expiring this year. So that TIF comes off and the valuation goes back. It's no longer sheltered, it goes back to the general fund. Personal services increased $19,551. The TIF budget includes an estimated salary COLAs steps increase of $17,354. You can see that breakdown on page 41 of what positions and the amounts are covered with the TIF fund. Contractual services increased $3,474, with small increases of maintenance and licenses for $6,300 due to the software ProTrack Plus being reclassed from the miscellaneous service. Last year it was put in miscellaneous services where it's actual license. It was moved this year to the maintenance and license. So you see that decrease of $7,800. Fixed charges decreased $994,128, all due to the debt service. TIF-related infrastructure projects are here. The principal and interest decreased $217,623. These were the bonds that the city had for CMP and Walmart that will be paid off in this fiscal year, so it will not be in fiscal year 25's. Credit enhancements, again, we're using the current tax rate of $30. Those estimated decrease of $776,509, again, that is due to the Walmart TIF expiring the end of this year. And then within the donation account is the $35,000 for the LA Arts. Any questions? I don't know if we want to, is James here?
Jim, yes, he is, just over your right shoulder.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Jim Pericles from LA Arts is here if you've got questions for him. I can vacate my seat if you have questions for LA Arts.
Councilor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. So, still learning about TIFs. I the Walmart TIF is expiring. Where is Walmart in Lewiston?
Walmart is out by exit 80. It was the big distribution center.
Right.
And it was,
The-
when it was built, it was the single largest earth-moving project since the main turnpike was built. So it was an enormous windfall for the city. We really did a heavy TIF on it, used it to fund additional infrastructure to develop business parks adjacent to it. Gentry Business Park 1 was done with that. Gentry Business Park Phase 2 had its own TIF, and then we've used it to fund a lot of the economic development programs.
So when the TIF expires, if I understand some TIF training I received, that means we get more back in the general fund, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's how I was
And really, the biggest thing, when it it's not that you lose the revenues, what you lose is that sheltering effect. So we'll pay a little bit more in county taxes, we'll receive less from the state and state aid for education and revenue sharing. So when it falls off, it would be, instead of a TIF account, it's gonna be in the general fund.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To follow up on Councilor Glant's questions and also to admit my own ignorance, when we authorize a tax increment financing of a project, what we've essentially done is tell the developer that he can have an abatement of his taxes of some percentage for some number of years. I think I'm gleaning from the discussion that those taxes that are paid by the developer go into this TIF fund. Do all taxes paid by developers under TIFs and projects under TIFs go into the tax increment financing fund?
It's a very good question, and we have started, we learned with the Walmart TIF that it was a wise way to do it. There's two kinds of TIFs. There's one which is called the credit enhancement, which is where the developer gets a portion of the taxes back. And it's really to leverage, it's to make projects happen that would not otherwise happen. If we were not providing that support, they just say, look, it doesn't work. So that's really what we do with the council, and say, here's the return on investment for the city. So that is a council decision. And that is tax revenue out of our pockets going back to the developer. But it's a portion of something is better than all of nothing, is sort of the way we've always looked at it. The other way to do it is infrastructure, where we borrow the money and we use the new tax revenue to pay our debt service. Sometimes they'll take the debt and we'll give them the money to cover the debt service so it stays off our books. But those are the two ways that TIFs work. Walmart, we found, wow, this is powerful, and we get those sheltering benefits on top of it. That was the biggest TIF. We've written it into a couple of other TIFs since. There's a list that you get from the state on eligible costs. Economic development salaries is among them, marketing programs, LA Arts, things of that nature are eligible costs. There are infrastructure costs that you can do within the TIF district, and then to a lesser extent, there's like 3 tiers as you step away. But we've always really looked at it as a conversation with the council on, here's the eligible uses, here's what staff recommends, what do you think, you want to do this? And it's always, Heather and I have wrestled over the years on, Lincoln, I need it for the general fund. And because it's, the money is available, it's not governed. When you have it in the TIF, it does limit how you can use those dollars. But if there are things you would be doing anyway, my thought is it makes sense to do it and take advantage of the sheltering benefit on top of it.
Okay, more answer than I wanted. But
Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. I gleaned something from it. So money that is then paid by a project under a TIF goes, not all of it, but maybe the lion's share of it, the lion's share of the projects goes to the TIF fund. Some tax revenue from projects under TIF may go to the general fund depending on how the TIF is structured?
Yep.
Okay, got that. Now, the sheltering means that if money is received by the city for that portion of taxes that has not been abated for a particular project, that goes into the tax increment financing fund, that then is protected from valuation for the county tax? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, and I was trying to follow your language, but in a nutshell, and I'll try not to be long-winded. The amount we pay in county taxes and the amount we receive from the state for the two different funding programs is based on the size of the total valuation for the community. So if you do not, when you TIF it, let's say it's a $1 million project and you TIF half of it, well, you got to count half of that value counts towards the city's total valuation. That other half, you don't have to, no changes.
Great, okay, the light bulb just went on.
Got it, okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And since you mentioned LA Arts, Professor Parakilis is here, and I wondered, first of all, why is a donation to LA Arts covered under the TIF fund as opposed to the general fund?
Because it was written into it and it was eligible. And again, so we can take that 35.8 divided by the mill rate. We can take that assessed valuation. We don't have to pay county taxes on it. We don't have, and we'll not have a reduction in state aid for education and revenue sharing.
So was the TIF for the development of 168 Lisbon Street?
No, this was all this comes from, this was really for operational costs with LA Arts. It had nothing to do with, there's no TIF on their building or their lease at the building. It was all
Okay.
money generated by Walmart, and it was an eligible cost to fund an arts program.
So to fund an arts program, that's the Walmart TIF?
Walmart TIF is paying for that. It's an eligible cost as long as we write it into the TIF.
Okay, and we wrote LA Arts support into the Walmart TIF. Because
Not by name, but yes.
Okay.
In concept, yes.
All right, wow. Thank you.
It's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
It
all
really
right.
is.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I'm going to have more questions later.
I don't doubt it. And you know where to find me, so.
Councilor Najin.
I was just going to mention that that's one, you have the captured value, which you can use for infrastructure projects. For instance, if there's a project that the Saxon Partners project originally was supposed to rebuild a section of Avon Street. Secondly, when you put these funds aside within the economic development piece, with the captured value, and you're using them for programming that then helps with economic development without hitting the general fund. Like that's basically the point. You're getting a double value for it. You're getting investment money that you can put back in to draw people in for things that are related to economic development, and then you're also not having to look at it on your valuation. So, yeah.
He put it much more succinctly than I did.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. So when you were talking about the allowable uses for TIF revenue, is it allowed to use that for business support or anything like that? I'm thinking of like the whole issue with Obscura, with the, I don't know if that's a way that the city can make that right by using this funding, or if.
It's the right question. I would have to double check on the Walmart TIF. I don't think we wrote it into capitalized loan and grant programs. Since then, we have, but they've not been as large a TIF. But that is an eligible use if you write it into the TIF program. It's part of your economic development strategy, and you want to capitalize loan and grant programs.
Okay.
And we fully intend to do that with the Clean Energy Connect TIF.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. Lean into my microphone, not get in trouble. So the new jobs, 2 new positions you're looking to fund would fall under the TIF program, would not fall under the general fund for,
I will look to Tracy on that. It's really the timing on it. Because
2 new positions would now fall under, all those expenses we just discussed would fall under this page 41. Because they're not in there now, but that new 126,000 and all that would be.
Correct. So one of them was fully, the full request was under the TIF, the Main Street. The second one, they were looking to split it between CDBG and the TIF fund. Unfortunately, looking at the CDBG, I believe the administration is at their cap. So I don't, without them looking at their budget and seeing if they can move things around, I think the full would have to be in the TIF department.
So that's my thought was
that-
just saying
in
that
that page
most
40,
likely this
correct.
position would be there, and whether or not they shared them would be between the person in charge of that department and how that would work.
Correct.
Yeah, and it would actually be 75% of the administrative person, 25% is already covered by CDBG and would continue to be. So if this position was funded, 75% would be able to be covered by the TIF.
But if I understand correctly, if they're already capped, and you bring a new position in, that 25% is already spent
But-
for people here now, so you would have
Good
to say
point.
100% is covered by the TIF and nothing for CB.
No, that's,
Right, so
you're
that's,
if we add a third body,
I mean,
yes.
whether you use that person, that's between you and whatever happens upstairs, but for me, for my accounting purpose in my mind, they would fall under this particular.
You are
program.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Counselor Najin?
Just to clarify, though, the two new positions would be general fund expenditures for this year, correct?
And that's where I would look to Tracy, I think.
No, they're requesting, they're requesting that they come out of the TIF fund. So the recommendation would be that they would be paid out of page 40.
Okay, so when I look at, just to make sure that I'm correct on this, when I look at page 18, I have all of these different new programming expenses listed under general fund amount, and then when I look down at the bottom, when it gives me the $2.25 million, this chunk would actually not be part of that piece. Am I correct on that? Just to double check?
If you look like midway, you'll see that it's requested under the tax increment financing for those two. So the upper piece is the general fund.
I see what I've made the mistake on. I'm looking at the total requests and thinking that that's, the amount that comes out of general fund is basically 2 million.
Correct.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Yes, please introduce yourself and,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Jim Parakilis. I'm the Chair of the Board of Directors of LA Arts. With me this evening is our Arts Agency Manager, and
Gerald Walsh, by the
Gerald
way.
Walsh.
Yeah.
And he has some handouts for you describing what we do. And I want to say that, especially in light of this discussion of the changing TIFs, that we have had really very solid support from this city for many years, and it's enormously important to us. We run a very tight ship, and $35,000 is not a huge amount of money, but to us, it is absolutely crucial. And so, if you would bring these packages around, please, Gerald. I want to make sure that you all appreciate what we do in supporting the arts in both Lewiston and Auburn. And one way that we support the arts is by supporting all of the arts and culture organizations of the cities. And so you will find in the package, you will find the way to subscribe to our email newsletters that describe all of the arts and culture events of the cities. And I know that these other organizations appreciate that service. And in particular, I'd like to invite you all to attend the events and exhibitions of all of these organizations. And the one that we have on right now is an exhibit of the paintings of the Angolan artist Serafimi Solo, a really extraordinary discovery, and actually Mayor Shaleen has a role in that discovery, and Gerald Walsh, our manager, has had a huge role in this artist's creation of works in the city. And so it seems to me emblematic of where we're going as a cultural community, that we are cultivating this important artist here. We're not just bringing fancy artists in from other places, but this is an artist who will be known very widely and is having his first solo exhibit at LA Arts. So please come and see it. It's open for well into May. Happy to answer any questions.
I also wanted to let the public know that, beyond your new space at, what's the address again?
168 Lisbon.
168 Lisbon Street. So beyond using it for LA Arts purposes and your programming, you've also hosted many community events there, such as the Corner, music performances, etc. And so it's been a welcome addition to downtown. Thank you very much for that.
Sure, and we're really delighted that a number of organizations, especially arts and culture organizations, but organizations of many kinds, have begun using the space. It's a really beautiful space, and that allows us to collaborate with them in many interesting ways. One of the things that we're doing right now is working with a number of social service agencies and public health agencies in thinking about the ways the city is recovering and can recover from the shooting, and the ways that we can honor the losses that the city suffered. So it's really important to us that we make connections all across the city, and as well as with the arts.
In particular, I want to mention that I have some sketchy friends, and I think they're there the first Monday of the month. So yeah, a drawing group.
Yeah, I was going to say friends who sketch.
Yes, yes. Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to make clear that when we come to vote on this, I will recuse myself. I have an intimate relationship with LA Arts as the president of the Androscoggin Historical Society, which uses LA Arts facilities and closely aligned with it. I did want to point out one of the major benefits, although it may not be major in the great scheme of things, but the art walks that bring people to downtown Lisbon Street all summer long are a product of the efforts of LA Arts. I wholeheartedly endorse and support LA Arts. Unfortunately, I will not allow myself to vote on any decisions about donations to it.
Thank you, Councilor Chittum. Since you mentioned the art walk, I should say that we're in discussions with the city. We have really wonderful relationships with the city administration. And we have been working for years on various ideas to close parts of Lisbon Street down during the art walk. And this June, of the June art walk, we are on track to do that. We're working with the city and also with the Lewiston Downtown Association to make a really special, lavish art walk on that date.
We look forward to it. Councilor Najin.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention I greatly appreciate the work that you both do in the community, as well as the other folks that participate in supporting LA Arts. It is important to have downtown spaces that engage in placemaking, that don't necessarily always charge for entry, that create multi-use space in many ways, that allow for better access for the public to engage in arts and community. And I think your organization does a great job at that. So thank you very much.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to also state my support for LA Arts, and I think it's appropriate that it's funded by a TIFF, because it really is. It's not just a cultural organization. It's really part of economic development too. Getting people, especially the art walks. It gets people downtown, gets them going to restaurants and just seeing what our downtown has to offer. So. Yeah, I really appreciate everything you do.
Councilor Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor. So we talking TIFs, and the money comes from the Walmart TIF, if I understand that correctly. And Walmart's going away, is there a mechanism for future TIFs to continue to cover them? Or is this something in the future we need to be thinking about and doing something else for?
We've got several, mostly housing TIFs that are in the pipeline that I'll be in front of you over the course of the next year. And these type elements will be written into those TIFs with the portion that is our share that's not going back to the developer. All of those have a certain percentage of the taxes paid going back to make the project viable.
All right.
The big one that'll really replace the Walmart is the Clean Energy Connect project, which that is about all in, it's about a $250 million investment in Lewiston. That generates about $6 to $7 million in new tax revenue. Some of that has already come in. They've said police taxes at this level, but it really hasn't been bricks and mortar. It's really been soft costs that they've incurred. So they've been a great partner during some of our tougher budget years recently. They've sort of been the wind in the sails that sort of came in after the fact. So they've been a great partner, but that's the one that will really replace the Walmart at that scale. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
Councilor Najin.
Speaking of that specifically, do you think they'd be a really good partner and cover the $13 million shortfall in the budget this year? I'm kidding. But I am curious as to what's the timeline on when they'll be operational?
You know, they are under construction at this point out. They're building the, what's it called? It's taken from DC Power to
Transformer station?
Transformer station, thank you. Converter station, I think is what they're calling it. So it is a major investment. It's underway. It's been on order. It's equipment. So exactly when it'll be complete, off the top of my head, I don't remember, but it's probably within 2 years. Don't go to the bank with that. But that's,
Would you mind after this presentation, sometime in the next day or so, if you could possibly just maybe email council on when the expected, what the timeline is at the moment?
yeah, I can do that. Yes.
I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything further, Dr. Parakilis? Oh, anything further?
No, I'm very happy. Thank you. Thank you all.
Mr. Walsh, did you have anything to say?
Sure.
Director Walsh, my apologies.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to comment on the economic development capacity of the arts. I really believe in that, and many of the cities that were mentioned earlier that have really impactful downtowns, Bath, Brunswick, Rockland, we're seeing a lot more of those people from those towns visit the city. So when we have exhibitions, there are artists and other directors of organizations who make a point of coming into our door, introducing themselves, expressing appreciation for our work. And we're finding that, even a reach beyond Maine, so people are coming from Boston, we're representing an artist from Angola now, so even internationally, I think we're really being recognized as a place to go to. And so certainly during the art walks, but anytime we host a reception, our audience is growing all the time. So I just wanted to comment on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. And please, I know LA Arts has a lot of volunteers. Please thank them for us.
So the last piece we're going to go over before community development is economic development on page 76. So again, mention this is economic development is covered by the TIFF. This is it's remaining flat. Under these two accounts that you see, the recommendation for the steam plant is for transfer of $75,000 is in your fund balance. The current reserve for the BM steam plant is $177,724. In these lines, as you can see, of course, they are zero because all of these are being requested to be covered under fund balance is an additional $250,000 that's requested to go to the Economic Development Reserve. The program was developed, and this will be the third year, so 2 years, $250,000 has been moved into the reserve. The balance of that currently is $479,706. Are there any questions on these two?
Counselor Nagy.
What is that fund balance exactly used for? Just out of curiosity.
So it's used for economic, currently, like I said, it's been transferred for 2 years, 500,000. And currently, only a small amount has been used, and some of it was used for businesses. One was for a software, ProTrack, that was purchased. So that was purchased last year with those funds. And then some was to help businesses.
And there's $479,000 in funds
Correct,
in
in
the
that
account
reserve.
now. We're transferring another $250,000, I guess, correct? Or we're proposing
So the
to-
recommendation of fund balance for this year is to transfer another $250,000
And we're going to use that money for what?
for economic development.
Just for generalized
So, and
economic?
that's a
Okay.
sor-
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lincoln. You want to go, or do you want? Okay.
You'll be the better spokesperson.
So we started, as Tracy mentioned, we started this about 3 years ago. At the time, it was deemed that it was important to have another pot of money available for grants and loan programming for those projects that were not eligible for CDBG funding. So this gave those an opportunity for those projects to fill any financial gaps that we could help move forward a project that were not CDBG eligible. And unfortunately, most of those gaps tend to be larger, which is why you see some larger transfers, because those gaps, it coincides with a gap on a project.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah, I think that explains that portion of it. But could we use that funding, I guess, for other things that are deemed as economic development that don't go directly towards a project?
It would depend on what specifically you're talking about. Because we are using general fund balance to establish this fund, it would have to meet that one-time usage or capital outlay.
Okay. And I'm sure it would be in hopes of returning a higher tax base value in some
That's
fashion,
the
yeah.
design,
Yep,
yes.
okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Counselor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there written guidelines that we could see to know what that money can be used for? Is it like it comes in, you guys talk it over, and it's a good idea, we decide to do it? I'm just curious what the parameters might be for somebody who might want to apply or get money from the city. And I would use the person who's in my ward who's trying to get a business started, and they need money to get the city, to get new water line from the city to the business in order to operate and run. Would that money could be used in that area, or is it something else?
It depends on the project. Each project is approved by the council, and additionally, if it's part of the loan, it's also approved by the Loan Qualification Committee. So applications can be taken for that purpose. I know some of the funds, even though there is a fund balance, as Tracy mentioned, some of them were earmarked for particular projects already. So I would have to see how much of this balance is earmarked for current projects that are
Okay.
in the pipeline.
All right, so could we at some point get a copy of current projects so we know?
Yep.
It looks like a lot of money, but it may not be simply because it's already earmarked, and would help us get a better understanding if that's possible, please.
Yep.
Thank you, Administrator.
Counselor Harriman.
Thank you. So is this something that could also be used potentially to help out Obscura with the issue that they're having? And I know that if a lot of this is already earmarked, they're going to need some help sooner rather than later. with their staircase.
It is a possibility. I will say, these are also pretty much underwritten, so you need to really evaluate them, that you're putting them into places that there will be a return on investment is the intent.
Okay.
So it's not just, hey, we got grant money, give us, just knock on the door. There is a process and it is evaluated.
Okay.
So,
Just to speak to that point briefly, and also to speak to Obscura, if they're not able to function as an event space, they don't have a life on Lisbon Street. And so that basically means that that business will either relocate or close. So it's something to consider, possibly, but I assume there's an application process to
yeah,
this.
and we have been talking with them
Okay.
sort of all along, so we're well aware of the challenges and
Yeah.
everything. I think they've been a great addition to the street, and I know they've had rough sledding
Yep.
at the city.
So coming back to this fund, though, there is an application process, I assume, so that it's either grants or loans, like they work either way. Could you, when we get the list of what's outstanding for earmarked, could we also see that? Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yep.
I just think that, obviously, I think all of us up here are incredibly concerned about economic development overall, because we know that it's the future of the city. And so, we have, I think, both an interest in seeing how some of these things are set up, and then also, in encouraging the use of funding that we may have to keep businesses within our community. That's all.
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard you say that these funds are underwritten.
Internally, yes. And it depends on how complex it is. We do contract with an underwriting, Community Concepts Finance Corp, when we have a more complicated loan, but a lot of it is done internally.
Okay, then I guess I misunderstood, because it sounded to me as though these were essentially restricted donations to the city, but they come out of the general fund. And then the underwriting aspect is when these funds are used for economic development, there are conditions attached to them.
Yeah, each deal is pretty unique. So, yeah, we do look at it and say, okay, is this business viable? What's it need? What's it going to take? Let's have a strategy. Often we're providing technical assistance along the way to make sure that they'll make it.
Okay, so that's fine, well and good, and it should be done, but there are no external constraints. Once it passes those tests, it's not as though a donor has said you can only use this to paint the walls blue.
Yeah, no, correct.
Okay,
The CDBG stuff is a lot more complicated and cumbersome. That's part of the reason this was created, is it's much more fluid.
good, all right, thank you.
Yep.
This is kind of unrelated, or, well, related, because we've been talking about it, but I think what you've heard from the council is that we need a solution for Obscura that recognizes the city's involvement in the matter, and we should work on that post-haste.
Understood?
Thank you. Further comments or questions from the council? Councilor Chittum.
I hope I didn't miss this, but in the memo that you sent to us, Director Jeffers, I appreciate that, but you're talking about the CAC, and that stands for Community Advisory Committee.
Right, and you're leaving economic development and moving to our next one. I'm happy to take it on, but we're not quite there yet.
I was thinking we were about ready to adjourn. My mistake.
This is only half of my
We're
department.
just getting started, Councilor Chittum. Buckle up. Are we ready for CDBG?
I believe so.
Or Councilor Najin, did you have something? We're gonna take a brief 5-minute recess as we gear up for CDBG. And we're back. Please introduce yourselves and kick us off.
Okay, I'm Lincoln Jeffers, Director of Economic and Community Development, and I have
Pauline Goodis, I'm the chair of the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Advisory Committee.
And I will just give a very quick summary on that. We've got 6 people on the committee this year. It's Pauline as the chair, Monique Roy was a first-year member, as was Eliza Alexander. Both of them are citizens of the broader city. Josh is our city council representative. Abdi Nagay, who works for Mears, has been our immigrant representative on that committee, as required by HUD, has been a wonderful part of it. Billy Jane Cook was one of our downtown residents who has participated in that, and that was the committee. Andrew Finney has been the homeless shelter representative or homelessness representative. He was not able to participate this year, so you can start thinking about who you want next year, Mayor. But it's been a good committee, and this group, it's a quick, short, intense timeframe. By the time we get the applications in, this committee reviews all the applications that mostly come from the nonprofit agencies seeking funding, and as well as both public works and public facilities. And that's also the nonprofits who need bricks and mortar improvements. The CDBG program, it's this 50-year anniversary for them. It really grew out of the urban renewal and model cities programs in the 1960s. And instead of each community having to apply for a whole variety of grants, they said, look, let's just guarantee you some money going forward. You can plan around it. And it has evolved. During my tenure with the city early on, we were receiving $1.3 million annually. We are now receiving about $850,000, $860,000 each year, and it does vary from year to year. And so as the revenues have gone down, they have that 20% cap, which Marion spoke about the other night, and our operational costs have gone up. So it keeps us dancing to make sure we can hit all the regulations we need to. But from HUD's perspective, they say, look, we're going to give you some money, and you should focus it on providing safe, decent, and affordable housing, a suitable living environment, and an expanded economic opportunities for your low to moderate income people. We are that entitlement community. We got into it a little bit the other night, but it's a formula-based program. Congress lays out, here's the allocation we're going to give to CDBG. And out of that allocation, 70% of it goes to entitlement communities. We don't have to compete. We don't have to ask. We've been receiving it, I think, since 1972 or 3. The state also gets an allocation, and the smaller communities in the state knock at the door of the state saying, say, I'd like to do this economic development project, or I want to fund an arts program, or we need new benches or new lights, and they apply to the state. So that's sort of the way it has worked. A lot of this is local decision-making. And the only rules HUD says, well, it's yours, it's your money, you can use it. There's a bookshelf of rules, but benefit low to moderate income people as you use those dollars, aid in the prevention of slums or blight. And the third one, which is rarely used, is meet an urgent and serious threatening need that can't be met from other sources. And I'm sorry to report that we actually did use that earlier this year after the shootings. We had a lot of businesses that were on the ropes, and we had just gotten a payoff on a loan we had made 20 years ago. And I came in, I said, it's an urgent, needed need. Let's reallocate those dollars. So that I didn't think I'd ever be able to use it, but I was glad we had it. And this was a great program for allowing us to do it. Most of the dollars need to be spent in this area. These is the downtown census tracts. 202 is the Sunnyside neighborhood. 203 is more or less Spates College. It runs out to Russell Street. And 201 and 204 are the downtown. 204, the southern edge of that is East Avenue, and the river runs along the bottom of this. And we have really focused, especially on the infrastructure projects. This is where we have focused the dollars. We have loosened the strings a little bit just over the last few months, where we had a lot of low to moderate income residents who were living outside the downtown, but they needed to fix up their homes. And so we did what we needed to do at HUD to free that up and expand the area where we can spend those dollars. It used to be a very small percentage. It's now much more open than it had been. This is the primary work of the CAC, and I'm sorry, Counselor, I know you had a question about a CAC. Do you want to take that on now?
No, I'll let you finish, Director Jeffers, and then I've got a couple of questions that if you answer them during your presentation, great. I won't have to talk.
Okay, fair enough. And really, this is, Pauline does a great job chairing it. How many years have you been on the committee, Pauline?
I believe so.
If you can move the microphone closer to you, that
I
would
usually
just be
speak
great.
louder.
Chair Gudis, thank you
It's a
so much.
tough crowd.
If you could move it just a slight bit closer, the microphone.
I speak loud enough, Mayor, trust me. 7 years.
I just received word from David that we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, so Pauline has chaired it. It's really, we have each of these committees come in, they give us an exhaustive application, the committee reads it, and then they're charged with scoring it. And we also interview the committees. And it's really a way to make it rather than a subjective scoring, it's objective. It's like, here's what you need to do. How are you doing on your budget? How are you doing leveraging other dollars? Are you hitting a specific need within the community, and how well are you meeting that need? Am I missing any of the criteria?
No. In past years, we did 12, 13 agencies that we would, in fact, fund. And if you see now, we're only funding 5 or 6. We used to have to do 22, 23 interviews. Now, this year, we did
I think
10 or
not.
11.
Yeah.
And that was it. And it's really tough because the money is getting smaller and smaller, and there's greater need for what's happening. But we interviewed every agency and scored and came up with the numbers.
Came up with the numbers, and it is tough because, as you can see from the spreadsheet that's up there, we had $91,000 more in ask than we had under the cap that we could put out. Excuse me. So the work of the committee is really scoring these folks, and in the recent years, we've been able to fully fund 6 agencies. This year, general assistance came into the mix again, and there's absolute need there. They have had to add bodies to meet the demand coming in. A lot of it's immigrants coming to the area, and so with that, we had 6 larger asks, so we cannot fully fund them. So the methodology we have used is, as the scores broke out, it was all 6 committee members would give us their scores, we come up with an average, and that's the column that says score, CDBG CAC score. We take that, their ask times how they scored, turn that score into a percentage, and that's what the city, the committee recommends they get funded at. And so you can see on those top 6 agencies, nobody's getting the full ask. And all of these agencies, Trinity has been a stalwart in the downtown, really helping with the homeless population and food pantry and a diaper bank. Seniors Plus is the
Meal on Wheels.
Meals, I was going to say lots to gardens. No, they don't have to grow it. They just get cooked. Meals on Wheels. Social Services, the immigrant and asylum seeker position we were speaking of, and New Beginnings works with homeless youth and on an educational program, and Lewiston Adult Ed also helps bring skills-based to our anybody who needs it, but a big focus on helping get our immigrants ready for the workforce. Elements that do not get scored are the CDBG office administration, and the amount we can use there is 20% of the allocation you receive, and in addition to that, you can use 20% of the program income that comes in each year. Program income is when we make loans and they come back. That's what a program income is. I have wrestled with the finance department for years saying, why can't I budget? I'm tight on my budget. Why do I have to keep it to just that 20% allocation? And the budget you're looking at is the CDBG allocation, and that's why. And they finally got it through my thick head that you're limited to 20% of the amount you receive each year. You do have extra, but you can't budget for it. It just needs to come. So the amount that we're allowed to use is at $168,692. The actual costs, as you can see, are about $20,000 higher than that. We'll have to fund that a different way, but through that 20% on the program income. The other two positions, we fund a code enforcement position who is dedicated to the downtown, really working to improve the quality of the housing stock, evaluating, shutting things down when they need to be shut down, helping us write scopes of service for rehab, helped with the lead program. The other one is the rehab administration, which is putting out those CDBG loans, doing environmental reviews, things of that nature. Those we don't really score. Those are just staff positions and support for them. As far as public infrastructure projects this year, Public Works put in for 3 different ones. There was public bathrooms, which was 6 bathrooms at $300,000 in total. Sunnyside Park, which really has not had a lot of attention. They are part of the CDBG target area. I think it was 2010 is the last time that when the park and playground equipment was
The
brought.
Sunnyside Neighborhood Association in Fund LA, yeah, so it was 2009, 2010, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember the ribbon cutting. I remember that was the last time CDBG dollars were spent in the neighborhood. There's been some public infrastructure investment there, but it has not come from CDBG. We have plans for doing some TIFF if we can get the Saxon project along the river going, so there'll be money. But this area is deserving of seeing some CDBG investment, so the $70,000 is really to hire a landscape architect and come up with design services and how do you better utilize that park and maximize it, engage the citizens who use it most. So this is a first step. Marion the other night was also talking about the spend down problem. And instead of saying, okay, here's $300,000 for Sunnyside Park, and then we can't spend it, we're back in the problem of not meeting the spend down. So this is the first chunk of future allocations for Sunnyside Park, or the Sunnyside neighborhood. And then the last piece was, there was $253,000 worth of ask for the House Street sidewalks between Ash and Sabata Street. And really, the committee recommended, after we funded everything on the top side, what was left, and that $219,000 is what was left, and that was where that recommendation came from. I do want to mention something, and I think it was in the, I may have mentioned in my memo, it's also mentioned here on the back sheet, and the back sheet of this CDBG budget just lays out, here's the allocation, here's the various caps we have. But Seniors Plus had put in a request. I think it was a $4 million project in total. They had asked for $175,000 to help with rebuilding and expanding the kitchen for the Meals on Wheels program. And unfortunately, they thought, okay, we submitted, we're approved. We had some turnover on staff, and bottom line is it got lost in the woodwork. And it just came to our attention that they are expecting the funding. Council has never acted upon it. Council's never approved it, but they have had a $175,000 ask. And this is up to the purview of the council. I want to make you aware of that. We could just ask them to apply in a future year. But rather than funding the House Street sidewalks, you could take that $175, take it from the House Street sidewalks, which would leave some money for House Street sidewalks. And then talking with Public Works, they have said that they do have other funding sources that would help move that forward. With that, I'll be quiet and take questions.
Councilor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. I got 2 questions. You said that people can apply to the state. Could somebody outside the zones you show in Lewiston apply to the state for a loan?
Because Lewiston is an entitlement community, we're not eligible for state money, nor would any residents of Lewiston be eligible. Individuals really can't apply. It would really be public service agencies. But because we're an entitlement community, we get $850,000 more or less each year. So we can't apply as a city, nor can any of our nonprofits. We have our own pot of money. Does that address your
somebody's
question?
a public service outside those 4 areas,
Yes.
it's out of luck.
Outside of,
The map you showed, let's say somebody is all the way down Lisbon Street, and they could use help and assistance, they don't have no avenue to get any kind of funding, because we are entitlement, so we can only go here, and they can't go to the state and look at the state funds.
No, they cannot apply for the state funds. We have expanded the eligibility of homeowners. The public works projects have really been in that CDBG target area, those 4 census tracts. The public facilities funding, Seniors Plus, is outside of those targeted census tracts. They're out at the
That's what my
Raceway
question
Business.
was.
Yeah, they're out in the Raceway Business Park. Because of the population they serve, they would be eligible.
So it's based on the population. Somebody outside that would have a better chance if they're servicing your little 4 areas on the inside when you look at your application process and how that actually works.
Right, and it is an exhaustive application process. I mean, you have to have,
I'm going to, we have a lot of drug and alcohol facilities, people who run programs inside that area. Would they be somebody eligible to apply to get work done on their building? I mean, we have people we just gave money to not too long ago, who run 3 or 4 houses, and things like that. They probably could use some upgrades or some changes, and maybe they're not aware of what this is available.
yeah, so is this an agency that owns properties and
Yeah.
has because like New Beginnings we have funded. Usually not on the public, well, we've helped with their center on College Street. They made some improvements. It was not CDBG, it was a different pot of federal dollars, but we have funded those agencies. A lot of it comes back to serving that population of low to moderate income people, better quality housing, or expanded economic opportunities.
I'm
Those are,
thinking, I would throw out Archon, okay, they're an agency here that deals with people with drug and alcohol, they do training, they help, their clientele would fall into what you're talking about. Would they be eligible possibly for funding for something? And I don't know enough about it yet, but I see the agencies you have up there, and they're all, as I would say, name brand, okay, they're at the top of the list. But there are a lot of smaller agencies. One would be Church by Jesus, who brings out drug and alcohol people. They own their building, they offer a facility, they offer counseling to people, and they are always trying to find funding to keep their building, do things to make it more, keep up to the standards the city requires. So I don't know if they are aware of that, or if they would be somebody who could look into applying for this.
have them reach out. There is an exhaustive list of things that agencies need to be eligible to begin with. Marion is the staff person who really is the person who sort of does that proofing. She had a medical issue, she had a toothache that she shouldn't be here tonight.
Could she send that to all the council members so we'd have an idea?
We can
I'm
have-
sure some of us have things out there, groups we work with, that might be interested in knowing this is out there to apply for, and out of curiosity, so that's kind of where I was going with that.
Yep, I follow you.
Now, I see we're doing sidewalks and is that a priority over helping individuals? In other words, it seems like the largest chunk of the money is going to things that we should be paying for in a general fund, like a code enforcement person. It's nice to offset our budget and save money for our taxpayers, but are we taking that money away from organizations who are helping people who need to be helped?
Well, we're still stuck with that 15% cap, so regardless.
That's
yeah,
the driver there, is
That's
what's
what's,
the cap.
it's the cap that keeps us from spending them.
All right, good, thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Chittum?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions about your memo, which I appreciate very much. It indicates in here that HUD has said there's a cap on 16 public service agencies. Is that a requirement that HUD put down? I thought I heard you say that this is something that we selected internally.
We used to fund about a dozen agencies a year, and candidly, we did not do nearly as good a job as we needed to meet HUD regulations. As far as we have to go in and inspect, and the documentation they provide us, and we need to audit them and check out their facilities. And having a shrinking staff, the staff is half the size it was back in 2000. And so our HUD field rep said, you guys, we know you want to help everybody, but you're funding a dozen agencies, you don't have the capacity. So they said, we're cutting you off. You can only fund 6 agencies with the staff capacity.
So that is an external constraint then?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. We recently learned, and I'm quoting from your memo, that Lewiston has a grandfathered cap of 18%. Can you talk about that, and why aren't we using 17 instead of holding flat at the 15% cap?
Well, and that's a good question. Historically, literally, we found out about 3 months ago. It's like, oh, by the way, it's like, how did we not know that we had this cap? We have always just operated under what everything you read says it's a 15% cap. And our HUD rep said, oh, Link, you could do that, but all the other things would suffer, is what it comes down to. So I would encourage you, we can't add agencies, we could add funding to them, but if you added money for the agencies, you would have less money for House Street and Sunnyside Park. And so those are the numbers that you just need to play with.
Okay, but to Councilor Gland's point, are we prioritizing, and you keep mentioning House Street, your memo says Horton Street.
Excuse me. We had done House Street. If it's Horton
Okay.
Street, excuse me.
Okay,
yes.
that's all right. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I've got mine.
This project that went through the CAC is for Horton Street, between Ash and Sabattis.
It's House Street, sir.
It is House Street.
House Street, Ash.
So House Street is right, and my memo is wrong.
Okay, all right. Anyway, the point still is, to Councilor Gland's point, that if we have even, I think that works out to about $30,000 more if we use the 18% as opposed to the 15% limitation. Would we be better served by taking and supporting the organizations that have an excellent track record and supporting those in need over putting granite sidewalks and granite curbing on House Street? Not that that's a bad project, but that's my question.
And it is your purview. Something I did not say. The Citizen Advisory Committee does all this hard legwork. Council and Aging participated and had some sense of it. But it is their recommendation. The actual decision-making is yours, the council's.
I appreciate that, but I don't want to fly in the face of recommendations either. These folks have done the work, they've done the lead work, they've studied the issue, and they're far more intelligent on it than I am. So my question is, I guess, and I'm not sure how to address you, Pauline, whether it's Chair Gudis, or how would you prefer to be?
You can just say Pauline, that's fine.
Thank you. When the Citizens Advisory Committee did the ranking and the allocation of funds to these 6, and we're limited by HUD, to these 6 agencies, were you aware that there was an 18% cap instead of a 15% cap?
Not initially. We were told 15%. It's been 15% since I've been on the committee. And things have changed and fluctuated. For several years, we did fund social services, and then HUD said we couldn't fund them. So we were able to fund, this is the first time Literacy Volunteers is not getting any money from the city. And this is basically most of what they get is an allocation from us, and that helps run their program, which is basically a one-person program, and the rest of the staff are volunteers. And they provide a great service to the community, in particular, the immigrant population, and trying to get them so they can speak English, have conversational English, so they can eventually go to work and be productive. But we're funding a social service person because Elaine needs that person. I mean, as you heard the other night when Elaine did her presentation, their budget is skyrocketing, and a lot of it, not a lot, but a good percentage of it is staff. If she doesn't have staff there, how are people going to fill out applications and get pushed in the direction where they need to go to get the assistance they need? So that's why that's in the 6 agencies.
And I keep forgetting that you have a 6-agency cap, because Literacy Volunteers has asked for $5,600, which is well below the $30,000 that we've just recently learned is also available, but we're not allowed to issue grants to more than 6 social service agencies. Listening to Director Brackett the other night say one of the impediments she has is that she doesn't have enough English language teachers. And here's an excellent opportunity for literacy volunteers to step in and help. They can't solve the entire problem, but to help solve that gap. And yet our HUD service rep is saying, you guys can't handle more than 6 agencies. We appear to have the money, the $30,000 differential between 15 and 18%, but we're constrained because someone has arbitrarily said 12 is too many, we're going to give you 6. Can we appeal that somehow?
We can certainly have a conversation. Yeah, we can have the conversation.
I would like to see, particularly given, the small amount that Literacy Volunteers is asking for and the fact that we heard Director Brackett?
Yes.
Last night say that, 3 nights ago, sometime in the recent past, say that we have constraints on people who can't speak English. So if you could look into that, that would be wonderful. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you, Councilor Chittum asked the question that I had about the number of agencies that can be funded.
Okay. Councilor Najin.
A couple of questions really quick. So, and first, I just want to say, Pauline, you and your team did a fantastic job. I was absent for the majority of it. They went through all of this in a period of 5 meetings in a period of like a week and a half. So just fantastic, really impressive. How many loans do we currently have out from community development block grant funds? We have the rehab administration, which also handles loans. And so my question is, like, how many loans do we actually have to homeowners? Do we have an idea?
I could find that out. I mean, over the years, we've got many grants or loans we've made over the years, and that's the program income, which generates. It's been dwindling, and we've had a couple of big payoffs, but I think we're getting about $10,000 a month in program income.
Okay.
I would venture we're 75 to 100 loans that are out there.
And the second part, just coming back to the Seniors Plus point, because I think that's a big one, and I think that's a huge support for the community, especially the senior community. What exactly happened? What occurred for Seniors Plus to think that they were receiving $175,000 from community development block grant funds when we hadn't even looked at the proposal?
Yeah, it was right as there was a shift from one person was leaving the community development program manager position. Next one was not in yet. The email was sent. Our verbal conversations with the former program manager gave the Seniors Plus the impression it had been approved. I searched through all the CDBG, every action taken over the last few years to see if council had taken any actions on it. They had not. I was copied on that email, and I had, with everything that was coming at me, shy on staff, I had missed the Seniors Plus. I was aware they'd applied, but I'm not the one who normally sort of does other staff handle that stuff. So the ball was dropped at the end of the day, internally in our department.
Okay, and I just want to check with you, Pauline. Did the CAC ever review the application?
We don't get those, Josh. We only get the front sheet of the paper. We don't take care of those public facilities, which if you looked on the back of this graft, it shows the Y, it shows Safe Voices. We don't get to see that. We don't get to have any input on that. That's all done by staff internally.
Yeah, and actually this, what went out in the spreadsheet, I was cleaning it up. The YWCA, Tree Street Youth, there were 4 or 5. So Seniors Plus was listed as a possible use of contingency funds with last year's budget. Most of them ended up getting funded. Seniors Plus just never got put forward.
Okay.
Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is probably a question for our administrator. Obviously, this could be visited again in the parking lot. Could we look at this particular budget and whether or not we want to fund Senior Plus and maybe not do sidewalks or something else
Yes,
in order to correct something?
Yep.
If we decide to go down that route. The other question is our $5,600 for language, can that be moved to the parking lot to be discussed for nonprofits? As another means of trying to fund that this time to take care of that problem. You know, this year it didn't happen, that's just fine, but some of these things might be, you know, they may not realize they can apply under the nonprofit type situation funding that we do for request. And in case they haven't done that already, I'd like to make sure we give them a shout out or an opportunity to be looked at to help out our overall problems. We already heard this as being an issue. Thank you.
Anything further? Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I just wanted to revisit the difference between the 15% and 18% cap. It looks like it's about 33,400, and then I was just looking at the difference between what was requested by the 6 agencies and what was recommended, and it's about 19,300. So I don't know if we could move that to fully fund them, you know, move that from, you said the sidewalks, Public Works could probably get different, have different funding sources for that. I don't know how complicated that process is to change that after the committee has already acted.
Well, this is sort of the first blush. This is a workshop. This is a work in progress. I'm getting the sense that I'm hearing is you'd like to get closer to that 18% cap, utilize it, and probably funding the existing agencies that are already recommended. They're just going to get closer to their ask. And if we can get literacy volunteers into the mix, either getting a pass from the HUD, saying, yeah, one more agency. And candidly, they have always been a very good reporter. Yeah, all of us were like, oh, literacy is just out of the running. It was just wonderful organization. All these organizations are wonderful. That's what's so challenging. But again, our funder sort of has a rule book, and we need to abide by that as well. So I think I've got a sense.
Councilor Najin.
I'm just thinking to Councilor Harriman's point, if we could verify with the Public Works Department that they do have an alternative funding source for the sidewalk, we could possibly just move to cover the Seniors Plus costs now. I also hate the concept of cutting any type of funding for my neighborhood, which never sees a penny of this money. But if we have to do it to cover Seniors Plus, I think that it's something that we should seriously consider.
Councilor Chittum.
I hesitated to speak on the $70,000 for an architect because I know that Sunnyside is near and dear to Councilor Najin's heart. But I just wondered about, is that a proposal from an architect, or is that sort of a set aside for the potential of some architect maybe charging that much? It seems like an awful lot of money to do architectural work for a playground.
Councilor Najin.
I think I can answer that. It's not just a playground. It's actually a large amount of area. And currently, and I think what the architect's going to find when they get there is that there's a major drainage problem that's located at what used to be baseball fields that is now just a soggy, wet, soaked field that could accommodate probably 4,000 people. But ultimately, no one can use it. We can't even have movie night over there because it's too wet. There's considerable structural work that needs to be done as far as the drainage is concerned. But I think this was basically the original proposal was a mock-up for just improvements generally. When you look at the park, it's a pocket park. I'll walk you through it anytime you're interested. There's a King of the Hill like mound of dirt with big trees growing out of it, which creates like a line of sight issue. Directly behind that is, I believe, a water feature from like the 30s, which just is still just sitting there right now. There's a lot of work that could be done in Sunnyside, and it's a large area. So
Yeah, I think it's about 8 acres. which I always sort of thought it was just that playground. All of a sudden, I was over in the neighborhood. I went, my God, there's a whole field back here, and then it runs all the way down to the river.
And also this winter, the storm in December and January, basically with the trees falling, basically destroyed all the playground equipment. And basically they have fenced off a good portion of the quote-unquote dilapidated playground. So that really needs to be fixed. And Sunnyside has been ignored for years by the city and by CDBG. And a couple people that was on the committee, Josh wasn't there at that meeting, but Eliza was there, and Monique was there, and Abdi, and we all were saying that park has got to be fixed. We cannot just continue to do what people would label the tree streets. People who live on other sections of these 4 census tracts deserve to have a safe place for their children to play. If you want to look at playground development, take a look at Lionel Potvin Park. That got a significant amount of money through CDBG years ago. And if you talk to Megan Bates, who takes care of these parks, that is probably one of the best parks in which the residents were so happy to get such an exquisite park. They got a water, I don't know what the water thing is called, but so the kids can play in some water and great equipment. They made sure that it was safe, so when people come across the South Bridge, there were barriers so they can't get onto the grass without destroying their cars and possibly stopping cars. The neighborhood will not let someone abuse that playground. And I'm serious. Public Works, Justin Bison said his guys were tarring and redoing the sidewalks on the street. And there was a bunch of stuff left over from a birthday party. And Public Works guys started to pick it up, and a neighbor come running out of their building and told Justin to get his guys off the playground. They found out who did the damage, left the garbage, and he said they're coming down and they're cleaning it. And I view Sunnyside, that neighborhood is really a close neighborhood, and they want something that if they take stewardship over it, that's going to be a jewel in the city's eyes and taken care of, hopefully as well as Lionel Potvin Park. So it's really worth putting the money and getting it done right versus just going in there, throwing some tar down, and throwing up some basketball hoops and put up a set of swings. That area is really quite lovely and is absolutely deserving of having this park designed and done right. And there is a drainage problem, a huge drainage problem over there. And who knows what's under those mounds of sand.
Yeah, no, it's true. One of the pieces, just to throw this out as well, is because I think because the neighborhoods are somewhat segregated in certain ways, like the structure of the neighborhoods kind of keeps people in their own little neighborhood. There's a Riverwalk trail that's 1.25 miles long, which is probably one of the better public outdoor features of the city that starts at Sunnyside Park. And one of the things that I know from living in the neighborhood for so long is that a lot of special needs services will actually bring their kids or their adults to the park, and a lot of people coming into the city will stop at that playground, even as haggard as it is, with their kids to play on the playground. So it's got a fair bit of use, and yeah. Anyway, but still, we do have a problem with the Seniors Plus funding. So.
And depending, again, this is not going to be our last conversation on this. I will work with some of these numbers, make some recommendations that you can say, well, love them link, or let's change this, let's change that. I'll bring a spreadsheet that is, rather than a PDF, we can actually work on it right on a live.
Councilor Chittum?
Thank you. I'm glad my comment generated so much passion. I'm certainly not arguing against improving Sunnyside. I'm simply, and what Councilor Najin was talking about are bricks and mortar. That's not what this $70,000 is for. This $70,000 will move not 1 ounce of sand. It's for architectural design services, if I'm reading it properly. That was my question. It seems like an awful lot of money to have somebody do design for even an 8.5 acre park. I'm all in favor of making the improvements there. I'm just questioning the size of the money that we would pay to an effort that actually results in no dirt moving, no drainage improvements. It's all pre-design work, and I would think that unless there is an architect out there who has given you a bottom line best effort proposal, that money could be drastically reduced.
It's my experience that architectural services, certainly can be expensive, but they are well worth it. Councillor Najin.
Whatever work gets done is going to be released on an RFP anyways, is that correct? Yeah, so we could realize a considerable savings depending on who bids on it, and I don't know if you want to come out of retirement, but I could use you in my neighborhood.
Not an architect. Don't we have a general services agreement for that sort of work anyway? Yeah, okay.
Anything further?
On CDBG, no. Oh, excuse me, we do need, we still don't know the amount of money coming. It was flat funded at the federal level, which was good. We thought we were going to see a cut. We should hear before you take final action, we'll know, and so that's when we can really do the final allocation of dollars. We may get more, we may get a little bit less.
Councillor Najin.
Didn't Marianne email everybody saying that we'd been approved for the same amount?
Well, the federal dollar was flat, but if you have more, it really, the way the formulas work, and you may have fewer or more entitlement communities, so it's a good ballpark guess. We're probably going to be within 5, 6, 7, 10% of what we got last year. Either way, we just don't know until we get it. So yes, but that was the case, and I think it's under threat next year. But for the year we're going into, we expect to be very close to these numbers, but we would need a recommendation on how to proceed one way or the other. But let's do that after we have a better sense of all of it.
Councillor Chittum, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just have one more question. I'm curious what the discussion and the rationale for not including the bathrooms in the CDBG funding was. Can you talk about that?
Money. It was a money issue as to where could you do, we did not have enough money to do all 3 projects, so we had to make a decision as to which ones we're going to do, and also the bathrooms depended on having an added staff person added to Public Works, and to have someone available to clean and monitor those bathrooms 7 days a week. And the bathrooms would have to be, if I remember what Megan told us, at least once, if not twice a day, if not several, because the bathrooms would be open 24/7. So they would need to be inspected several times. My understanding was several times a day to be monitored to make sure that there was no issues in there, and that people weren't sleeping in there, that someone hadn't overdosed in there. So there's a lot of issues. And she wasn't positive as to whether or not that person would in fact be hired or approved by the city council. And that's why we decided take care of the sidewalk. People do a lot of walking in that Howe Street area to get back and forth to school, to get groceries and et cetera. And that Sunnyside Park, really, that area doesn't have recreation available. And if you live in the Sunnyside area, you're not going to allow your child to walk to Kennedy Park or to Parity Park or to Lionel Potvin Park or down to the riverfront. You're just not going to do that. And that's why the decision was made.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear the rationale. I don't want to let go of the bathrooms because people aren't going to hold it. And right now, they're sleeping in the doorways of our downtown Lisbon Street. They're urinating there, they're defecating there. I really think that we need to focus on providing a place, even though it may be a place to shoot up, at least it's better than the storefronts on Lisbon Street. So whatever other means we have to pursue that, if it's not through CDBG and you've made a decision and a recommendation, if it's not that mechanism, then it really ought to be another mechanism. Thank you.
Councillor Glenn, did you want to add something?
Yes, real quick, just want to thank you and your committee.
Thank
And
you.
all the work you did. I didn't know anything about CDBG truly till today, and didn't know exactly how that money got used or where it got used. So I'm very pleased with what you all did and went through the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Najin?
Somewhere, can we put on the parking lot the possibility of a bus stop within my neighborhood? I know it's going to involve also AvCog, most probably, but right now, we're a community development block grant community. We don't have sidewalks on all of our streets. They're not plowed. And there's no bus at all. There's no bus stop in my neighborhood. So you have to actually walk to Main Street. If you have a situation where you're not highly mobile, it can be difficult. And the reason why this came to mind, I was at the 7-Eleven, and I noticed they had a can of Campbell's savory vegetable soup, and it was $5.24. And I thought to myself, I couldn't imagine like that being my local grocery store. So just a thought as far as like I don't know if it can go within where it would sit, but I would love to explore even maybe next year with community development block grant. Having that maybe be a project. But okay.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. Two things. I also wanted to thank Chairwoman Gudis and the committee for all the work they did. And then also to Councilor Chittum's point about the bathrooms, I believe we could fund them through the LCIP. I think they're on that list as well. So it's another option that we have for funding those.
Councilor Longchamps.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the bathrooms. I personally don't think they're a good idea. I think that the hospitals offer bathrooms. There's the library, at the City Hall, I believe here too. Are they open to the public, the bathrooms? So that's just my opinion about the bathrooms. I think they're a good idea.
Anything further?
I've got one more budget item. It'll be much quicker. I'll get through it. So it's the home budget.
Is that ending CDBG
This
then?
is ending CDBG. Thank you, Pauline.
Chair
Yes,
Gudis, thank you so much for chairing the committee, and please thank the committee members for me.
So, we are part of a consortium with Auburn. In 2002, neither city was large enough on their own to apply for home dollars. We gathered our resources, applied together, and have been getting funding since. And again, this varies quite a bit. In the year we're looking at, we're going to see just shy of $260,000 is what we believe we will be getting this year. That's the item Councilor Najim mentioned, sort of an email from Marion saying this year it's going to decline, so we suspect this number's low, or excuse me, it's high. But that's the best we've got to work with for the time being. This is much simpler. You really can only use it to help create affordable housing or support affordable housing. And we've only used it for a handful of programs. We use it for security deposits for those who are homeless or near homeless. Last year, they allocated $15,000, and only about $3,700 has been drawn down so far this year against that. So we're not recommending any new funding go to this because it seems like we've got enough resources to cover the need over the coming year. So that money that was left over from last year, $11,300, will be included in the budget for expenditures this year. What Lewiston has primarily used it for is to help leverage these large low-income housing tax credit projects. We used it for the lofts at Bates Mill. We used it I think we used it for the Hartley block. We certainly have it into the Wedgwood project, which is 82 units of housing. We have it, we expect to be coming to you for discussion of using it for the DeWitt project, which is the one where the Sun Journal formerly was. That building will come down, there'll be 104 units. Those are like $40 million projects, so it's $450,000's a very small piece, but it's an important piece, and it helps leverage all these other dollars. So our recommendation for the last few years, we helped build Gavro Place, which is up and running, just up the block, Lake and Pine Street. Wedgwood's under construction, and the DeWitt project is actively seeking financing now. They have asked originally for $450,000. In talking with them, it may be something less. So the actual joint development agreement that'll be in front of you, probably on April 2nd, or excuse me, yeah, I think it is April 2nd. There's asking for up to $450,000. If they can find other funding sources, they will reduce their ask on choice. This is the sort of thing that could help with senior housing at Martell, possibly, or any other LIHTC project that comes in. Alternatively, it could just be used to help. It's difficult to use for low-income housing. It's the rule book, again, is very cumbersome. We used it to help somebody with a trailer who was paying outrageous interest rates. We said, look, let's just refinance it. So we were basically the primary funding source. And he kept wanting to move, but there's a requirement that it's your primary home for 10 years. And if you leave it, you got to pay it back. It was a deferred, I think it was a deferred loan. I don't think he owed us anything. He paid like taxes. So that's why we have not used it for housing projects, smaller scale housing projects. But that is the recommendation. And
Councilor Glant?
Thank you, Mayor. When you said rents, what were you meaning they could help with rents?
the security deposit.
So is our people here who help out people who get rents through Section 8 aware of that? How would they apply?
Yeah,
I mean, we heard from her, there's a difficulty maybe doing that. Is that another fund stream that she could be aware of?
Actually, she's been the primary feeder of that to us.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's communication between GA and our department. And,
Awesome.
and on Section 8 stuff, Lewiston Housing this is part of the reason we didn't spend that much money. They fund their own security deposit program.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councilor Najin?
Just, I'm seeing that the lines for deterioration of, like, my question is basically, can I see over a period of time what home funding has been used to be allocated for? Is there a place I can look for that somewhere so I can see like how we've allocated for the past, like, let's say 15 years? Because it doesn't look like we do much self-funding of any small scale projects at all. We just,
Yeah, over the last 4 or 5 years, we really have not. We did one.
Sorry, do you mind moving the microphone?
Sorry.
thank
Yeah. We did do, I'm remembering one rehab of a project near Pettingill School. And again, there was a requirement. I will both give you a list of what's been done, and part of the reason why we have stepped away is just the regulations associated with it were just difficult.
I think about the single-family homes with some of the seniors in them where they're kind of trapped in because there's no other available housing for them to move from, and their housing stock sometimes deteriorates, things like that. It's just a question.
Well, it's a good question, and in this budget, we don't know how much we're going to get, but there's approximately 77,000 or so that's sort of contingency that could be used to capitalize the program if we can figure out a way to do it.
Okay. And just real quick, back to the administration. After I said that, I started thinking about the bus stop. I started thinking about basically Tall Pines. That bus stop is basically destroyed. And then when you're on Pettingill Street, not College Street over by Pettingill Park, that bus stop is in pretty rough shape too. I'm just wondering if maybe we could do an inventory of our bus stops.
I would refer to the Deputy City Administrator who serves on the Transit Committee, as well as Councilor Harriman. I'm sure they'll talk about that at the next meeting.
It would be Councilor Chittum is now replaced
Chittum's
Councilor
now on
Harriman.
it?
But we have a meeting coming up in April, so we can look into those. They're supposed to maintain those, the Lewiston Auburn Transport, AvCog. I know that we've had discussions in the past about expanding the routes, and as you know, there's a cost that's associated with that, so that would increase our share of what we have to pay to Western Maine Transportation to do that.
So if they are indeed responsible for the bus stops that are currently there, that infrastructure, yeah, there's definitely a conversation that needs to happen. Thank you both.
Councilor Chittum?
Thank you. Let me know, Councilor Najin, and we'll certainly take that up on the Transit Committee. Director Jeffers, I see that Lewiston Auburn created a consortium to apply for these homes funds because we're too small individually. Lewiston's bigger than Auburn, has more people, has a larger budget, has more need for homes. and yet only gets 40% of the share. How's the apportionment? Why does Lewiston get, why does Auburn get a larger share of the chunk than Lewiston does?
That's a good question. They have the bigger portion of the administrative burden, is what it came down to. It was really Rain Minahan, who was the former community development manager in Auburn. It was her brainchild. And so as they created, said, look, I'll take care of all the legwork. You can get half the money, and we'll just take a higher percentage of the administrative, which is capped at 10% on home. And so that's how the numbers had worked. And it is a written agreement between the two cities. If it's something you would like to revisit on the apportionment, but that's where it came from, and it's somewhat of a legacy.
Okay, did I read that this agreement extends back to 2010, or is it something?
I think it was founded in 2002 is what I
Okay,
thought.
all right. Yeah,
When it
I
was
would,
created.
when the opportunity
Yeah.
arises, I would like to take a look at that. They have a new economic development director over there who doesn't have the experience, the wherewithal that Rain Minahan had. So maybe there's an opportunity for Lewiston to recognize that they have less capability in Auburn than they did previously.
Anything further, Director Jeffers?
I'm here at your leisure. I'm done.
We might call it a night then.
Okay.
Did you have anything else, either Administrator Hunter or Deputy Administrator O'Malley?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I think that concludes it. I thank the counselors, and I thank you.
Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you.